Hey guys, and welcome into the video. My name's tomjsherlock, and we are going to go over today what we learned from Playday 1 and 2 of the R6 Blast EUL League. What we'll do is we'll bring up the table right here, and as you can see, Wolves are on top with 2 wins from 2 games, and we're going to make our way down this table and then go through each team and what we've learned from the 2 Playdays we've seen. Every team has played at least once, with some teams playing twice, and we'll get cracking straight away with the new look Wolves. So our new look Wolves team, we did have to unfortunately say goodbye to Bibu, the belly goal king, and also Shaiko, one of the most notorious planters who was fantastic in fantasy R6 EUL leagues with all his plants. But in come Asa from Helios, and then also Lasmo from Make Your Destiny. If you don't know, Make Your Destiny and Helios are T2 French sides, and you can see a picture of the new look squad here. But what have we learned from this new looks Wolves side? Well, what we've learned is that Wolves are back to their best. Obviously, they missed the Manchester Major, which is maybe why these changes came in. They also had a disappointing tournament over in Malta, losing a series to T2 side Team 86. So I think that's why the changes have been made. And Lasmo and Asa have come in and they have impressed. Wolves are sat alone, top of the league, on 6 points, 2 wins in regulation, so looking good. They won their first game 7-5 up against ITB. And I mean, the first game at the start of last season, Wolves lost on Consulate to ITB, so they turned over that curse of losing the first game of the season. They then went on to have a really impressive win up against VP. And one thing that was key in that win against VP was P4 on the Monty. You can see here a screenshot from some of the chat where Wolves are just saying, why don't you ban him? And then Monty also calls Always to almost smash his monitor. Check out this clip.
It's always up to Always from VP, it seems.
But all in all, I have to say I'm really impressed with Wolves. These 2 new pickups seem to be fitting into the side very nicely. They've got 6 points out of a possible 6. And we'll take a quick look at the team stats here. As you can see, Deadshot isn't really having the best of seasons, which is, I would say, maybe a good thing, because they managed to get 2 regulation wins. And when Deadshot comes alive, this Wolves team looks even better. They'll be going up against Fnatic next week, who have looked really, really poor. So you could see Wolves going into Playday 4, 3 regulation wins from 3 games and top of the league. My prediction was for Wolves to finish 4th, and I think they might even challenge now, having seen how they played, for that top 3 or top 2 spot. But we'll move on to the next team now. Our next team is obviously going to be 2nd place in the league, BDS, who have also played 2 and won 2, but it was a little bit of a dicey affair. As you can see, the first fixture was an 8-7 victory up against Wild. In that game, Wild was 6-4 up and then 7-6 up, but BDS managed to still get it over the line. Whether that was first game Russ coming in or Wild just performing really well, we'll get onto that later. But BDS managing to get it over the line. Our second game for BDS, they were back to normal fashion, and boy was it a cracker of a game. They managed to beat G2 7-4 over on Bank, and it was the Shaiko show, ladies and gentlemen. Shaiko proving he can do it in EUL, and not just when there's all the money on the line in EWC. And here's a couple of clips from Shaiko just going nuclear, finishing 17-5 up against G2 and securing them 5 points at 2nd place in the league.
The video for us earlier saying,
we saw your video, don't you worry, we've got you covered.
I did Batball just showing Shaiko how it's done.
And Shaiko's the player here to watch Bolt. Everyone else seemingly holding on to the other side. He finds the first one and the second. Oh man. Shaiko is cleaned up here on the Volt drop. Loira though, looking for a refrag, has to sprint in and push for it here. SMG 12 in hand, but Shaiko does what Shaiko does best.
So what have we learned from BDS so far? I think pretty much what we all expected. We can have a look at the team stats here. Uzis just carrying on where he left off, continuing to be an incredible, incredible player. Shaiko being Shaiko as well. And I truly think BDS are probably going to finish top of the league this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if they make it to the main stage at the Montreal Major. I also think, well, I said before the start of the season, if BDS don't win a major EWC or SI, I'll chop off one of my toes. So thankfully I won't have to be doing that. I did say it in Jessie J Chick's chat and someone has screen grabbed that. So my toes are safe. But yes, all in all, BDS continue to look bloody dominant, smashing G2, dicey against Wild, but I think that's the makers of really good sides. Even when you're maybe not putting in your best performance, and that's not to take anything away from Wild, you still get that win over the line. But now we'll move on to our third place team in the league. So our third place team is indeed going to be Wild. And well, it's been a wild run and a wild story for this team. Obviously massively underperforming in the last stage. A really, really poor stage for them. But we brought in 3 new players. And you can have a look at the side here. You brought in Croxon from Revan. And Revan didn't really have the best of times. Then Freck from in Team 86. Freck, an absolute gunner, and it's his debut in EUL, same as Croxon. And then the new IGL for the side, Leighton, formerly of Jihu, which now means all those players who were previously on Jihu have made it into T1. Leighton at Wild, MC and Shed at Elevate, Adrian at Secret, and Creeds at ITB. So it does go to show that if you put in the work and you grind and you perform at T2, you can get your shot at T1. So Leighton, Freck and Croxon coming in as the new players. Dodo or Doodoo, it's not Doodoo. He was maybe Doodoo last season, but he's now Dodo this season. Coming in, who was a sub last season, now in the full roster. And also Patball remains. And one thing that I think is really of interest is with Leighton coming in as a shot caller on the IGL now, it has sort of freed up Patball. He's playing more aggressive operators as well, with Leighton maybe playing the ace or the hard breach or the wall denial, which is giving Patball a bit more freedom. And I think that's why we're seeing these results coming in, along with obviously Frack and Croxon performing, Dodo performing. I mean, it's a good team performance all round. Their first fixture, as you can see here, was that 8-7 loss to BDS. But boy, did they perform well. They have 3 match points in that game, 2 at 6-4 and 1 at 7-6. Maybe just a little bit of first game jitters. You've got 3 of those players making their debut in EUL. And I think there were probably questions asked of, were BDS a bit rusty? Were they taking it a bit lightly? Is this just a flash in the pan for Wild? Well, boy, did they back it up in Playday 2. As you can see here, a 7-1 victory up against Ents. And I have to be honest, I'm really getting on the Wild hype. They play exciting Siege, it's all a little bit different. Leighton has been terrorising T2 Siege and IGLing in these pickup stacks that he's been playing in. So I'm so proud of the man finally getting a shot at T1. Wild do now have a week off because obviously new season starts on Tuesday. So there's only going to be a play day on Monday. So that means that they do have a lot of time off. Will that be a good thing for Wild or will it not be? I'd love to know your opinions. I think for a team that was only really officially together for 6 days before that BDS game, to have a bit of time off is going to be really good for them to gel and improve. You could argue maybe it halts their momentum a little bit, but I think that time that they'll be given to focus up, get to know each other a little bit better can only be positive. So Wild, for me, a really exciting team this season. It's sort of reminiscent of what we saw of ITB last season, where they came onto the scene and they obviously made the major in their first stage. They made EWC as well, with T2 talents coming in. And it really does make you excited if you're that. I'm not one of these, by the way, but if you're an aspiring pro, like, if you keep grinding and you keep putting in the effort, you can get the job done. And I know we're focusing on Wild here. I've got a little screen grab of a little bit that I believe it was Lasmo had to say for Wolves about how if you put in the work, then you can go from watching these players to playing up against them and beating them, which I think must ring so true. So yeah, Wild, really excited about their prospects this year. Can they keep this momentum going, or will it just be a flash in the pan? I think knowing Leighton and knowing most of the players on that side, I think Wild are here to challenge for one of those major spots. So next is our 4th place team, Team Secret, who really excite me. I thought they were fantastic last year, or last stage, making the main stage over in Manchester. Unfortunately coming up against BDS, which was a bit honking because I didn't want to see that EU clash in the quarterfinals. But Secret have made one change, as you can see here. Virtue has come in for Miracle, and I don't think Secret could have picked a better player to bring into this roster. We saw Adrian coming in at the start of stage 1, who was an entry for Jihu, now going on to hard support for Secret. With Virtue coming into this team, he is now taking that hard support role off Adrian, which has freed up Adrian to be a little bit more entry focused and a little bit quicker in the lobby. And that is what Adrian thrives and is fantastic at, but also shows how versatile of a player Adrian is. He came in my stream after their game up against Ents, and he said he's learning so much from Virtue inside and outside of the game, and he feels it's only making him better as a player. But how did they do? Well, they managed to beat Ents 7-4, and they looked very, very, very good doing it. I have predicted Secret Down to finish second this year, and I think I'm going to stick with that after seeing 2 Playdays. I truly think the pickup of Virtue is a mastermind stroke of genius for Team Secret. It brings experience, and with one of the best hard supports in the game, someone who's so knowledgeable and has so much experience at this level, so it can help take the pressure off maybe Savage, who maybe felt a bit of pressure being the more seasoned player on that side, and also frees up Adrian to be a bit more frag heavy. And I mean, you've also got players like Doom who are just unreal. I mean, take a look at this clip in which he went 1v2 with a fantastic game sense rotate to make his long way up, back up to the hatch, and win out 7-4 over on Clubhouse.
And now Secret just need to keep this diffuser alive. However, Virtue is going to be dropped as he goes out of the door. It's all up to June. We know that he's a match winner. Can he secure this? He's got himself the vertical. He finds one. Can he get the second? He's going to need to be challenged, but time is running out for Ents. They have no choice other than to play the diffuser, and June gets the final kill to pick up the win for Team Secret.
Massive turnaround from that tack timeout, Tim. We speak quite a lot about the impact that coaches can have when they get involved.
So Secret, they've only played once, so I don't think we can delve into it too much. And it was up against Ents, who really struggled against Wild as well. But Secret, really excited for them. Think they've done some fantastic business. And I still think that they may finish second. And I can't wait to see how they do up against BDS. So that now brings us to everyone's fan favourite, G2. And G2 have made 2 big changes coming into this season. Obviously with that performance over in the Manchester Major, where they went out in the play-ins, losing to Liquid and then Fear X, it was a bit of a honking performance. And when you're such a big org like G2, if you have honkers, changes need to be made. And as you can see here, the new look roster are bringing in Blaz and Loira. 2 young gunners, a Frenchman and a Brazilian coming into this multicultural side with everyone all over the place. Getting rid of Benja, who's now gone to SSG, and Virtue, who's on a revenge tour over at Secret. A lot of questions were going to be asked of this G2 side, and they always are going to be. If you play for an org as prestigious as G2, you are expected to make all the events available. And after such a poor showing at Manchester, I think this is why we see these changes. But let's see how they started off. Well, they started off with a very convincing 7-2 victory over Fnatic. They systematically destroyed Fnatic over on Consulate. I mean, they went 4-0 to the good on the defense and were just absolutely rolling. Here's a fantastic little double C4 to secure that 4th round for G2 from the new man, Blaz.
They needed into picking up a beautiful kill with the mirror. 3 versus 4 then as Uno manages to get himself a second. We know that he's got this in his locker, but Deepak, he's going to shut him down, and the diffuser's going down. Starks is managing to pick that up, and that's going to leave us now. Nitro goes out. Beautiful. And a big double from Blaz. How about that? We've been focused on these new players, and Blaz, it's his time in the spotlight. What a beautiful finish.
But then it seemed that that initial honeymoon period for G2 was over when they came crashing back down to reality with a 7-4 loss to BDS. But I mean, Shaiko going 17-5 in that game, as we've touched on earlier, When Shaiko activates in a best of one, it's very hard to overcome that. Blaz and Loira had, I think, a very stinky game. They might have both gone 2 and 10 or something like that throughout the game, maybe a bit better than that. So struggled a little bit in that one. But I think it's still very early into this new G2 side to make huge sweeping statements about how they're going to perform. I think G2, they'll be in and amongst it. I think they'll qualify in the top. I put them down as 5th, so they'll be in the top 6, so going into the playoffs. I mean, they are notoriously just the kings of the LCQ run, so maybe they can make one of those runs again. But at the moment, I think it's going to take a while for this team to settle. I'll be intrigued to see how they go up against Wolves and ITB. We'll bring up the players' stats now. Doki had a fantastic start to the season as well. Alamelo as well performing, and Uno, just those 2 newbies, Loira and Blaz, having a little bit of a poor performance up against BDS. But then again, BDS, in my opinion, are the best team in the world. So if you're trying to qualify for the major, you don't necessarily have to beat them. But all in all, G2, I think, give it time, and I think they could come good. They, no doubt, there's no question that they have a quality. It's just whether or not they can get that consistently showing. So excited about G2 this season, but I don't think they'll be competing for the top 2 spots in the EUL this season. And we'll move on to our next team now. So our next team we're going to be looking at are the boys of Into the Breach, who, as you can see here, are one of the only 3 teams out of the 9 in EUL who haven't made any changes. Sticking with the goats of Azza, Oscar, Kendrew, Creeds, and Noah. And the boys got off to a mixed bag. They played 2 games already. First game, as we mentioned earlier, losing 7-5 to Wolves. But then they came back with a very impressive victory up against Fnatic, who may appear to be the whooping boys this season, with a 7-3 victory, with your boy Kendrew popping off in a big way. And well, what is there to say about ITB? Nothing has changed about this roster. Nothing has changed. It's just this team is continuing to improve as a team of reasonably new players to T1 Siege, with Noah, Oscar, and Creeds and Azza sort of being those newer players. And I think the boys will definitely be in the top 6. I think I put them down as 6th or 5th in my predictions, and I think that's exactly where they might stay. I think losing games like the games they lost up against Wolves, that is sort of your mid-pack. Excuse the term pack, I know it's #1pack for Wolves, but those are the sort of games that you need to be winning if you want to finish in those top 3 positions, because those are who are, I believe, are going to be your rivals for those positions. But they seem to absolutely have the answer to beating the teams that are probably going to be finishing lower down the run in the order. But not really much to say on ITB because there has been no changes. One thing that was exciting though, as you can see here by the maps that have been played, they did take a team to Lair. The first time we've seen Lair inside of EUL, and I think any team that takes a team with Kangaroo Kenny at the helm to a new map should be terrified. Kangaroo Kenny is a fantastic coach and does his work. Trust me, I've seen it firsthand when I was a content creator for ITB and I went to the boot camp. You should see he has spreadsheets and strat books for days. That man is fantastic at what he does. So I hope ITB can make the major again because I love the boys of ITB. But I think mixed bag, they would have been hoping to beat Wolves but then easily smash Fnatic. So I think they're probably going to finish middle of the pack but then be going into those playoffs for a major spot. And if they can get a good run, there's no reason we won't see them at back-to-back majors, which would also pretty much guarantee them locked into SI as well, which would be fantastic. So now we go to 6th place in the league, which is sadly Virtus Pro. Before the start of the season, I did predict Virtus Pro to finish 3rd. And boy, do I think I've made a honker. I know it's only one game, so I'm not going to jump to conclusions, but they brought up a stat on the mainstream, which I don't know if you saw, if you haven't seen it. Basically, what it was showing was that VP's reluctantness to play the new maps. It takes them on average around 60 days before they play one of the new maps in EUL. And I mean, when we look at the map pools, a lot of new maps have come in. We've got Nighthaven now, Consulate, and then Lair. And with VP not really wanting to go to Consulate, Nighthaven, and Lair, it sort of means that they're probably going to have to go to not their first choice map picks, because they're forced into banning these new maps that they don't want to go to. And while Wolves, they took them to one of those new maps on Clubhouse, and while you can see here, this is how it went. And VP just looked lackluster, out of ideas, and P4 on the Monty absolutely destroyed them. I think this may be the last hoorah of a stage for VP. If they underperform in this stage, I think it's big changes on the horizon for Virtus Pro. I mean, they just look completely different to what we saw them out at SI, which was only 7 months ago. And it just seems there's a lot of issues in that side of not individual issues, just how the boys play is maybe some would argue outdated, and a lack of wanting to adapt to these new maps is really going to hurt them in the map ban stage, because Clubhouse map they used to be fantastic at now. Teams know how they're going to push it and attack it, and that's why you see results like this happening. But I hope for VP they can turn it around, but something needs to change. I really hope they're working behind the scenes on those new maps, because they need to be going to them, because the old VP has been figured out, I'm afraid, by the rest of the EUL. So VP, troublesome, worrisome, but they have only played one, and Wolves did look good against ITB as well, so we'll see how they fare in their next fixture. So that now brings us to 7th and 8th place in the league. As you can see here, here's the league standings once more. Well, technically 8th place, so we'll do these two teams together because they're both joint. Ents and Fnatic both have played 2 games. They both only won 5 rounds, losing 14 rounds. And while they seem to have the same issues here, I'm going to be honest. Ents have brought in Alems, who has a good value of experience. Fnatic have brought in the opposite end of the spectrum, Sarks, with no experience whatsoever, his debut in T1, but then bringing in Kanto with a breadth and width of experience. But I think one thing that both these teams are clearly lacking is a bit of gunfire. I mean, we saw Azulx in one of his games pop off. He had a fantastic game when they went up against Secret, but as you can see here, they still went on to lose that game. And then in the next Playday, they got absolutely spanked down by Wild. Then we have Fnatic, who in their first Playday, Deepet top frag, but most of those kills were exit frags, losing 7-2 to G2, as you can see here. Then Fnatic got destroyed by ITB over on Lair. I think for Fnatic, the map picks were really intriguing. They went to Consulate, which was one of G2's best maps, and then they picked into Lair up against ITP with the mastermind that is Kangaroo Kenny. For Ents, it's worrisome. They picked into Chalet twice and now have been smashed and destroyed on Chalet twice. So where do they go next? I think for Fnatic and Ents, it's looking really worrisome. Both these teams, I mean, have had games which at the start of the season they would probably highlight to win. Ents would be expecting and hoping to beat Wild. Fnatic would be hoping to beat ITB. So I think just for both these sides, I think the LMs was a good pickup, don't get me wrong, to bring in that experience, but the rest of that team is lacking anyone who can just grab the bull by the horns and have a life game and maybe carry to a victory that you don't deserve. I think for Fnatic, they got rid of Jigsaw, who's now a sub, who was a gunner in his own right, and Tyrant, who did miracles at M&M. I mean, look at Yusuf Solotov in the best team in the world. Nath absolutely crushing it as well over with DZ. Nello now coach of Wild, and Wild have been impressive. So I don't know if it's Tyrant not being to the level or if he doesn't fit into the mould of Fnatic. I think it's probably the latter, not the former in that one. So lots of questions to be asked of Fnatic, because since Berlin, it's just been on that steady decline and there doesn't seem to be a solution as of yet. And it looks like bringing back Kanto and Sarks doesn't seem to be the solution. I mean, if we bring up the stats here, I know this is harsh because it's a man's debut at T1, but he is the lowest rated player in the league. And next week they go up against Wolves, which could be an even scarier fixture. Ents have G2. So I do worry for Fnatic and Ents because it is looking pretty poor. I put these two teams down to finish, I think, 9th and 7th. But I think we're looking at maybe, and I know it might be early to say it, but we're looking at 8th and 9th place unless these boys can figure something out and change around the fortunes. But yeah, big struggle time for Ents and Fnatic. So that brings us to the end of my thoughts and feelings about how the teams have performed in EUL so far. In terms of my predictions, I think I might be in a little bit off with VP, but I'm confident that Secret look even better than they did last year. I'm glad I'm wrong about Wild. It's always exciting to see new T2 players given their shot at the T1 stage. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this one and if you would like to see anything different with coverage of all the new stage 2 starting. I'll see you in the next one, you legends. Have a good one. And don't be afraid to get around it and get amongst it on the Twitch streams. We're literally watch partying everything. So be there or be bloody square. See you soon, guys. Bye-bye.